Hi, I'm Michelle Renee Lane, and I'm going to read an excerpt from my short story, Josephine, which will appear in the anthology The One That Got Away from Candisha Press. Inside the modern metal and glass structure, there was a large freight elevator. A sign on the wall listed the different businesses and floor numbers next to them. The building had 6 floors, and she wondered if she'd be able to catch a glimpse of the Weltzeitwer from the top floor, where the film studio was located. She pressed the up button to call the elevator, and while she waited, someone entered the building behind her. The only reason she knew someone came in was because the outer door rattled slightly when it closed. The footfalls of the person who entered the building were completely silent. When he suddenly appeared next to her, she covered a gasp with her hand and then laughed at the fact he had startled her. The older man had salt and pepper hair closely cropped in a fashionable cut that made her think of aging punks she'd seen in London. This man wasn't as old as them, and she guessed that he was somewhere between 40 and 45. The smile he flashed her reached his sparkling crystal blue eyes. He had a handsome face with good bone structure, full lips, and a hint of dimples that would allow him to flirt without ever speaking a word. But when he said hello, in French-accented English, the hairs at the back of her neck stood on end. Before she could respond, the elevator arrived. He opened the metal gate and held it for her to step inside, and then he closed the gate before pushing the button for the top floor. "Are you going to the film studio?" Luna spoke to the man's back. He glanced at her over his shoulder. "Yes." "Me too. I'm Luna Cole." He chuckled with his back to her. "I know." "You look familiar to me. Would I have seen you in any films?" He turned to face her, and his eyes roved over her body from her toes to the top of her head. "Perhaps. I've been working in adult films for 15 years. He extended his hand to her. "I'm Nicholas Blue." Luna recognized the name, but had never seen his films. Still, she couldn't help feeling like she knew him from somewhere. Gazing into his impossibly blue eyes, she understood where his name had come from. A smile played at the corner of his mouth, and he licked his bottom lip. "I'm very excited to be working with the Josephine Baker of porn." Luna was no shrinking violet, but the timbre of his voice and the raw need in his eyes made her cheeks flush. She laughed nervously. "You read that article? What does that even mean?" Nicholas took a step closer to Luna and continued to caress her with his gaze, but he didn't try to touch her. "I think they mean, like Josephine, you work almost exclusively in Europe as an expat, and you're a beautiful black woman who knows how to use her body to tell a story and entice audiences." She was suddenly very aware of how fast her heart was beating. The space inside the elevator seemed to be getting smaller, and she was relieved when it stopped on their floor. The open floor plan of the studio allowed for a variety of films to be shot at once, with different themed rooms separated by movable privacy screens. In the center was a lounge of sorts. The director, a woman Luna had spoken to weeks ago during a Zoom meeting, was on the phone and motioned for them to have a seat. Luna set her overnight bag on a chair and then made herself comfortable on the leather couch. Nicholas placed his duffel bag on the floor and sat at the opposite end of the couch, unbuttoning his jacket before straightening his tie. "Have you been in Berlin long?" he asked. "My train arrived at noon, so I've only been here about 7 hours. Have you worked with this company before?" "No, have you?" She shook her head. "I wonder if they usually do shoots at night. Typically, I'd be ending my day at this hour." "I'm afraid that's my fault. I prefer to shoot at night." Luna wasn't sure how to respond, and since he didn't seem to be offering any further explanation, she just smiled and shrugged. Luna had a knack for reading people, but she couldn't quite figure Nicholas out. He hadn't done or said anything inappropriate, but something about him made her nervous, the kind of nervousness you feel when you're watching a scary movie, and the anticipation of the next fright is building, and you know at any moment something bad is going to happen. You're afraid, but excited at the same time. "How long do you think we'll have to wait?" Luna said. "I hope it won't be too much longer. I really want to kiss you." Luna shifted in her seat. "Am I making you uncomfortable?" "No," she lied, and pretended to be interested in a potted plant on the coffee table instead of looking at him. Nicholas moved closer to Luna and took her hand to kiss it. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, pausing to make eye contact. "Not unless you ask me to." Luna pulled her hand out of his. "Are you usually this friendly with co-stars before a shoot?" "No," he laughed. "Then why are you flirting with me?" "Because you're beautiful and I can't wait to fuck you." Something about the way a Frenchman said the word fuck always turned her on, but there was an almost hypnotic quality to Nicholas's voice. Before she could decide if his words concealed a threat, he pulled her closer for a kiss. He tasted like strong French cigarettes, cold night air, and something she couldn't quite place, a metallic tang that reminded her of pennies. She wasn't sure how long they'd been kissing when the director came to talk to them, because Luna didn't hear her approach. "Should I just set up the camera here?" Embarrassed, Luna ended the kiss and stood on shaky legs. "Sorry, I never behave like that at a job when I'm not on camera." "Don't apologize. It seems you two already have great chemistry." Nicholas stood and shook the director's hand. "It's my fault. I've been coming on to her since we met in the elevator." "I'm waiting for my lighting guy to show up. He's running late. Can I get you both something to drink? There's wine and beer in the fridge. We also have water, and since it's going to be a late shoot, I can make coffee or tea." "I'd love some coffee," Luna said. "Nothing for me, thanks," Nicholas said. The director went to the small kitchenette across the room and started a pot of coffee. Nicholas took Luna's hand again. "I don't mean to be unprofessional, but I am drawn to you." "I'll stop if I'm making you uncomfortable." She laughed. "What's so funny?" "It's just that we have sex with people for a living. We're supposed to be turned on for the camera, but we feel strange about being attracted to each other behind the scenes. I'm not ashamed of being attracted to you. In fact, it's a rare pleasure to feel this way about a co-star and not have to act for the camera." This is going to sound like a really lame pickup line, but do you think we could have a drink after the shoot? I'd really like to talk to you about your films." She didn't answer right away, choosing her words carefully. "I don't date people I work with. It's one of my rules. Let's do the shoot and see what happens later." He leaned close to her ear. "Well, at least we know we're both getting laid tonight."